Yeah, Psikyo games tend to bring all the boys to the yard.
Uh, oh my. Uh, oh, wow.
Sorry, I've broken the family-friendly fourth wall here.
That's all right. That's pretty funny.
Shoot the Core Cast.
Welcome to Shoot the Corecast, the official companion podcast to the RF Generation Shmup Club. This is a family-friendly shmup-themed podcast that isn't about guns or birds, but we're definitely about gunbirds. I'm Addicted, also known as Addicted to Shmups, and with me as always I have
MetalFRO, also known as Game Boy Guru. And if you'd like to connect with us, please follow us on Twitter at ShootCoreCast. You can also follow me directly at Game Boy Guru. Check out linktr.ee/shootthecorecast so you can find all of our podcast feeds and a link to our shop where you can buy t-shirts. Also join rfgeneration.com. It is free to sign up and come join us for a Shmup Club playthrough. We would love to have you on board and have you participate alongside us so that you can be involved in the conversation and, maybe have us share some of your thoughts on the podcast here. Also, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your preferred platform. And at the front page of rfgeneration.com is a link to our Discord, where we've got a dedicated Shoot the Corecast topic where you can discuss the games, post your score, screenshots, or photos, and just talk about shmups in general. Also, make sure to follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/GuruGameBoy, so that you can see me streaming the Shmup Club Game of the Month.
We'd also like to give a shout out to rfgeneration.com, where we have a lovely forum full of people who are always willing to help and have a great database that has all sorts of titles and variants and regions. You know, you just get sick of buying Super Mario Brothers Duck Hunt for the Dendy again, and you go, I knew I had this. So this will help you avoid that collector conundrum. Do I have it?
Indeed.
And the one other thing that's great about rfgeneration.com is the Playcast group that will help you avoid that gaming constipation known as backlog as they go through one game a month and really have a lot of fun playing through it, similar to the Shmup Club that we have here.
That's right. All right. So before we dive into our discussion about our game of the month, which is Gunbird, let's cover our question of the month that I threw out on Twitter, which is, do you connect more with characters, such as in Gunbird, rather than ships, planes, or vehicles as you play a game? Why or why not? And we got a really good response from this question. So, first up, we've got @NeedNewShorts, who says, yeah, I do. Characters make it great. I especially like animal ones or weird ones. Toon shooters recently, and Hacha Mecha Fighter and Parodius, for example. Great weird characters to choose from. Oh, and I forgot why. Just visual appeal, I guess. But I want the character I'm playing as to look cool. Unless certain ships have better shots or shields or something.
Yeah, I definitely like the Parodius style or humorous style characters on there. That cartoony aspect makes things pretty interesting. I was just watching Studio Mudprint's stream watched a mecha fighter recently, and nothing like that. It was a flying weasel.
I think it's an otter, maybe?
It's an otter? Okay. We have platypus's fingers. It holds true. Almost anything can be a protagonist in STG. All right, our next one comes to us from @Hyper5Game. Personally, I'm a fan of spaceship or possibly flying humanoid with jetpack. Oh, if you're a fan of that, Gunbird's got your character for you. Can't really say why, except that's what I tend to play in my youth. Yeah, I think there's something pretty cool about like the Rocketeer or having character in a way that always seems to be the fast type character. Something harkens back to that spirit of adventure. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think that, we gravitate toward those kinds of things that we were into as kids. There's a nostalgia factor for sure. Next up, we've got @PonyTatsujin, who says, this is a tough question. If Ace Combat doesn't count, and I replied to Pony Tatsujin and said, no, it does not. So Pony Tatsujin came back with, well, crap. In that case, I identify more with ships. Why, you ask? Well, it gives you that sort of ace pilot feel.
Yeah, there's something to be said for ships as well, where you have those legendary ships. I mean, after Top Gun, who didn't go out and start looking up MiGs or the F-14 Tomcat, or maybe the F-18 Hornet? There is a lot of ships to love, and I think that Studio Mudprints has a love affair that's married there with UN Squadron and military aircraft.
For sure.
All right, our next one comes to us from @CollectorCast. It's all about the crafts. Ships like the Vic Viper are iconic. Oh, and they also sent us a gift of the Vic Viper for effect. Beautiful. Thank you, guys. Yeah, I mean, the Vic Viper and Lord British, and I don't remember what the green one is called, but they're definitely iconic ships in the same way that you get with the military aircraft and, let's say, Top Gun. They're instantly recognizable based upon their shapes or distinctive features that they have. If you had to name an iconic ship, would the Vic Viper be the first one that comes to your mind?
Probably, yeah.
You're not going to have both with Odomedius?
Oh. No.
It's a trap.
Stephen Eider responded to CollectorCast and said, then again, and included a picture of the dolphin from Aero Fighters 2.
Oh, yes. Aero Fighters always got those wacky characters on there. We'll have to cover that hopefully sometime soon.
Oh, yeah.
All right, our next one comes to us from @Maz67086804. Craft for me. I really like to pilot a plane, spaceship, helicopter. I find weirdly difficult to connect with humanoids in STG. I do not really know why. Probably only a matter of getting used to it. This is just me putting words in here, but I think that part of the reason that people may tend towards craft is they sort of can see themselves piloting it. With a character, you sort of have that role filled in. You can't do that fantasy fulfillment of you in the pilot seat. What are your thoughts on this?
It's kind of a situation where you either identify with the character that's on screen, or in the case of a vehicle or craft of some kind, you can sort of put yourself in that situation, and it sort of becomes that power fantasy where it doesn't matter who you are or what you look like, because you're a tiny little pilot inside the cockpit of this spaceship or plane or whatever, and you're the one making all this happen, and you're just kind of seeing it from a distance. So I guess it depends on I don't know. It's an interesting question, which is kind of why I threw it out there.
Understandable.
At Sega Collection responded to Maz and said same. So I guess they feel the same.
Our next one comes from us at Nerd Tantrum. Love the name. Tough question, to be honest. I love both characters and ship designs, but I guess I connect more with characters and ships. Also, Darius's bosses are one kind of character ship that works really well for me, and that's a great example. Something that sort of straddles the line between both. You have these really iconic ships, or something that's not quite a ship, but it's not quite a character on there. Where Space Mambo will be another one that does sort of this similar lines on there. Really good to answer.
Yep. At DWRKOA says, I lean more towards craft/machinery, but I'm generally fine with all, as long as they got badass looking wings.
Can we say that in this podcast?
I just did.
You rebel.
I won't make a habit of it, but...
Alright, our next one comes to us from at L Machine Games, also known as Lost Machine Games. What? This one just says, what a game.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because instead of a response, it's a funny sort of meme picture that they included that has a soda machine with someone that has a cup sitting underneath of two of these different spouts, and they're holding both buttons down, and one of the dispensers has, well, both of the dispensers have pictures, or like a picture from, I don't remember if it's Battlemania 1 or 2. I think it's Battlemania 2. And one of them is labeled char, like character, and the other's labeled ship. And they're doing that suicide thing that we often did as kids, where you mix multiple kinds of soda together. And so they're putting both kinds of soda in the cup at the same time. So I don't know if this is Lost Machine Games' way of saying it's all good, or if the nod to Battlemania is that it's like sort of having both at the same time, kind of have your cake and eat it too kind of situation.
Yeah, I was thinking of that taco commercial. Why not have both?
Yeah, right. So I thought this was a very clever little meme and decided to throw it in here because why not? So at Stellar Fury says, ships all the way.
Our next one comes to us from at MIDI Riots. It depends on the game. I could imagine Gynog with the ship.
Yeah, well, especially with the Western release of the game being called Wings of War. Yeah, that would... I mean, I guess technically a plane or, spaceship could have wings, but given the cover art, it doesn't really work to not have a flying dude as your protagonist. At the Daddy Otaku 1 says, I usually like ships, but sometimes cool things like this happen. And they included a still image of one of the endings from Gunbird with Tetsu and and his boyfriend. The beefcake picture at the end of the game. Won't spoil that too much, but yeah.
I forgot the name of the series now. Everyone's on. He went full.
Choaniki?
Full Choaniki.
Right. Yes, Tetsu goes full Choaniki.
Alright, our next comment is from Aunt Zoido. No, I don't care much about the characters. For me, it's about the ships. I love spaceships and badass aircrafts. The green silver hawk is my favorite. The only exception is Pentaru. Flying penguin in space beats them all. Parodias, I definitely like Pentaru on.
Yeah, I I don't know that there's anybody who doesn't like Pentaro. And then at Terciops Studios, who those of you who've been listening to the podcast for a while will remember we did an interview with for our very first Shoot the Corecast Gaiden episode about their game that they're developing, The Day We Fought Space. And so Terciops Studios says, "Ooh, that's a good question. Thinking over what I've played lately, characters are usually easier for me to get drawn into at first, but they only stick with me if they've got a strong presence, either visually, like Death Smiles, or narratively, like No Way Home. But when you talk about my very favorite games, they're ones where the ships themselves have personality, with the way they move and attack. Stuff like Jamestown, Graceful Explosion Machine, Risk System, those are the games that I return to over and over again. And then, when you get a game like Gundamonium or Legacy of the Elder Star that kind of sit right in the overlap of that Venn diagram, then yeah, that's kind of my sweet spot." This has got to be the most well thought out and lengthy answer we've ever got. This was 3 tweets. So thank you for that. And yeah, I kind of get what you're saying, because there's a lot to like when you're playing as a ship and you're kind of drawn to sort of how it moves, how it attacks, that a lot of that visual appeal in the game can really help sell it. And I know some folks, that's why they like character-based games. But yeah, I definitely understand where you're coming from there.
All right, our last one comes to us from @JohnPV. "I don't think it makes a difference for me, really. I'm usually more focused on the gameplay. The only exception would be that kind that pushes me away from a game. That's that lolly stuff. That stuff needs to stay out of STGs. Yet there is definitely some interesting choices made for some of these, and as we talk about the endings for the 2-player endings for Gunbird, there's a questionable choice in there that threw me off as well.
Yeah,
it borders upon appropriate maybe in Japan, but not so much in other places."
Right. So, what about you? Where you fall in this spectrum?
I think that characters with character stuff, I appreciate, because I can get maybe a little bit more of a story in the STG. And that's sometimes what I want, but then other times I want to just blow stuff up, and I want to look cool while doing it. And I think that it really depends upon my mood. If I really want to look cool doing it, I can play some Darius, or I can play some Original Gradius, or even R-Type Final 2 I've been playing a little bit of to get that nice ship feeling. But at the same time, that build a character stuff where it's like, give a thumbs up, give a salute, blow a raspberry. It's pretty much, they could have replaced those with emojis, right? Everyone skips the beginning of R-Type Final 2. I mean, it's all about to customize your character, but they could replace them with emojis, and it wouldn't care. To me, that's all about the ship. And within character-based games, I sort of lean towards those, maybe towards more with cute-em-ups. I think that a good character-based game would be good for cute. Bullet Hell, it can be. While I like the Toho type games, and I think that they are great at teaching you how to STG. By the way, I'm copying that before Mark kicks it over for a series. I think personally, I fall more in line with ships are classic, where if I'm going the way of a cute 'em up, I would prefer a character. I could go a little bit either way with that when it comes to Danmaku. Both of them seem to be there, but you see a lot more character-based play with Danmaku. With Cave and the way that Cave does it too. It would just be sort of weird if you're flying through Ketsui with a flying lolly or something. But
Right.
it's traditional games. I would prefer to do cute most with characters and with with ships for your non-cute ups. But for Danmaku, it can go sort of either way. I guess it really depends upon what mood I'm in. You know, if I'm always ready for some tuna sashimi, or if I want to just go around worlds shooting up suns and enemy bases and flying around on a pair of wings. That's a great thing about this genre. Anything can be a protagonist and anything can be an enemy. We've got a game on the TurboGrafx or PC Engine where you fly in a toilet. Anything's possible.
That's right. Yeah, for me, I tend to gravitate more towards ships. I think for a number of reasons. I find that, particularly with stuff where the hitbox is smaller, a lot of times the hitbox on the ship is going to be fairly obvious, like it's going to be the cockpit, or like in Under Defeat, it was the center of the rotor on the helicopter. Those kinds of things. A lot of those things are easier to see. They're visually more distinctive, I guess. And yeah, there are games where there's a very clear and easy to see hitbox, but for me, I find that sometimes the character surrounding that hitbox can be a distraction because it tends to be a larger sprite than if it was a ship or a helicopter or something like that. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to like the game, but it certainly is not my preference in that sense. Now, for me, in terms of character games, I tend to gravitate toward character games that are more horizontal scrollers. So things like Parodius, where you can see the characters' faces, at least at some level. I feel like they have an ability to be more expressive that way. And there are exceptions, things like Flight of Pigorus that we talked about. The flying pig was just unendingly cute. But in general, there's a lot more that you can do in terms of those characters being expressive and having personality when you get a better look at the character and you can see their face or, see their expressions, that kind of a thing. So in those situations, then I like that kind of character-based deal. Like Gundamonium that Tursiop Studios mentioned, or Gynog, that MIDI Riots mentioned. Those are good examples because it gives you the ability to, or at least for me, it gives me the ability to connect with those characters a little bit more directly, versus sort of looking at their back the whole time, like with a lot of top-down or vertical scrolling games. But there are always exceptions to the rule, and I think there are ways that personality can be presented, such as the game that we are going to be talking about today.
Oh yeah, we're going to talk about Demonize, right?
Man, I make a good segue and you just slap me down.
You set me up for it, though. All right. Yes, the game that we're going to be talking about today is Gunbird.
Yeah. And just briefly, let's go ahead and shout out our participants for the month. So, of course, we had you and I, but we had a really good crew this last month. We had Dougly007, B.Reality, Faux Macho, Geriatric Danmaku, Iori Branford from the Demonizer dev decided to come back and join us for this playthrough, which was great. We also had Zoido, of course, Cork, and Chris Tap 76. So that was a full 10 of us playing this game for the Shmup Club. So that was very cool to see, and a lot of good discussion on the forum about the game and some good good thoughts during the course of the month.
Yeah, Psikyo games tend to bring all the boys to the yard.
Oh my. Wow.
Sorry, I've broken the family-friendly fourth wall here.
That's all right. That's pretty funny.
I'd like to start with a brief introduction to Psikyo. They have developed 33 games over their 12-year existence, over half of them being STGs. The other half were mostly Mahjong games, and a couple other game genres as well. And the only Psikyo shooting game to never see a console release is the original Zero Gunner. Was that ported to the Switch via Arcade Archives finally?
No, Zero Gunner 2 came, although it was... Technically, it was called Zero Gunner 2 minus, because they basically rebuilt the game from the ground up. Because supposedly the original source code for Zero Gunner 2 has been lost.
Yeah, that's pretty sad to hear about.
Big time.
The final shooters, or STGs, released with Psikyo branding were not developed by Psikyo themselves, including Sengoku Cannon for PSP, the third game in that series, and a couple of Strikers 1945 spin-off games. In 2002, Psikyo was acquired by Xnauts, and in 2007, former Psikyo programmer Keiyuki Haragami started Zero Div to handle distribution of Psikyo's catalog. Zero Div was acquired in 2019 by City Connection, who also owns Jaleco's catalog of IPs. You thought I was going to mark that Japanese name, didn't you?
You did great, man. Hats off.
Yeah. Gunbird was also released to Japanese arcades in 1994 on Psikyo's first generation of arcade hardware. This included a Zilog or Zlog, Z or Z80A processor, and one of two Yamaha sound chips. It also included a number of proprietary custom chips. A tweaked version of the game was produced for worldwide distribution, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, but when you tested out the worldwide version, you found it a lot harder. So they made many tweaks to make it harder. In Japan, Game Machine listed Gunbird on their November 15th, 1994 issue as being the 9th most successful table arcade unit of that year. Gunbird saw release on both the Sony PlayStation and Sega Saturn in December 1995, with a European PS1 release following in 2002 and a North American PS1 release in March 2003, with the game having been rebranded as Mobile Light Force and almost all story elements removed. I guess that not safe for America. Also in 2002, there was a version of Gunbird on Yahoo Mobile. I didn't have a chance to try that. Did you?
No, and I actually didn't really find much information on it either.
Well, if it's like in the earlier versions, maybe it ran on Java. You can find a way to emulate that way.
That could be, yeah.
Gunbird Special Edition was released for the PlayStation 2 in Japan in 2004 and Europe 2005, compiling both arcade releases of both Gunbird 1 and 2. This release added a practice mode, and I believe that in the PAL version there was a 60 Hz option for this.
Yeah, I think so, but I wasn't able to confirm that.
Gunbird was added to the PSN in 2009 in North America, although it was the Mobile Light Force version. Ooh. Sorry, folks. After Zero Div, yes, you can insert that later. After Zero Div took over Psikyo's IPs, they began to port them over to the Nintendo Switch, and Gunbird released December 2017 on the eShop. Physical compilations were released for Psikyo shooting games starting in 2018, and into 2020, the North American release of Psikyo Shooting Stars through NIS America. iOS and Android versions labeled as Gunbird Classic released in 2016 by South Korean publisher Mobrooks. So I have to ask, what versions did you try this month?
I spent most of my time with the Steam version, which is, I think, based on the Japanese ROM, and it's got some sort of cleaned up visuals and a couple of different things. It's essentially a port of the Switch version that supposedly has some of the input lag reduced. And then I also put a little bit of time into the Saturn version. I fired up Mobile Light Force just to refresh my memory on that. And then I also put a decent amount of time into the mobile version on Android, just for grins. And then did a few runs in Fightcade with a couple of RF Gen members.
Yes, I remember that. It definitely seemed like it was a harder time dealing with the Fightcade worldwide release than dealing with the one-on-one of the Steam version.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, I played mostly on the Steam version as well, but I switched over to the Saturn version near the end of the month, and I have to say, I sort of like, just spoilers here, but I sort of like the Saturn version the best out of everything I played. I didn't try Mobile Light Force. I'm not crazy enough to, that's punishment.
What, are you saying you don't want to play Charlie's Angels, the shmup?
No. I played Charlie's Angels, the game, and that's punishment enough.
Right. Well, let's get into gameplay here. So, Gunbird is a 2 or 3 button game, and I didn't find any documentation, and maybe I'm just looking in the wrong place, so I'm not sure if it's always a 3 button or if there's like conversions for different arcade setups. But basically, button A is your primary fire. It's not auto. And so then when you press the button, it sends out a volley of fire, and then if you hold the button down, it charges your special attack. Button B is your bomber, and button C is your auto fire, assuming that you have a button C on the cabinet that you're playing on. The game plays out over 7 stages. The first 3 of those are randomized, and then stages 4 through 7 are always in the same order. Now, when you clear the final boss fight, the game loops, and so, like most of the Psikyo titles, the second loop is always at a higher difficulty, with more bullets and basically Psikyo hating you more than they already do. And also, like a lot of the other Psikyo games, you can come into contact with enemies and not die. So when we covered Strikers 1945 2, we saw this where if your plane ran into another plane, it would do a thing where it would power down. Well, it's similar here, where instead of a power down showing up on the screen, your character sort of shakes for a second, and then the power-up icon starts to float away. If you're fast enough, you can grab it and not have to power down completely, but it does go pretty quickly, and when you touch the enemy or what have you that makes you power down, you are sort of frozen in place for about a second and a half or so. So it definitely makes it harder to get that power up back. There are 5 characters to choose from when you start the game. The first character on the screen is Ash, who is a 28-year-old German inventor who flies with a jetpack. His main attack is focus forward and gets a little bit wider as he powers up, adding these energy ring deals. His charge attack is a large energy blast, and his bomber creates a large area of effect for a couple seconds. I guess the de facto main character of the game is Marion, who is a 13-year-old witch who flies around on a broom. Her main attack starts out as a forward shot only, and then as you power her up, it'll widen, and then also adds these homing star deals at level 3. And her charge attack is an energy ball that contains her pet rabbit Pom Pom, and it sort of shoots out and then, goes through and hits an enemy. Her bomber is a series of spinning blades that sort of radiate out from her position on screen, in all directions. And based on what you see in the game and what I've read elsewhere online, she has a mean streak and is kind of selfish. Valnus is a Russian-created robot who wishes to be human. His firepower is all forward, though at level 3 and 4 he does get these lasers that sort of curve outward and up to give you a little bit more coverage. His charge attack is sort of like a super punch, where these metal fists go out on wires and sort of go out right in front of him and punch whatever is directly in front, a certain distance from his body. And then his bomber is like this series of lasers that shoot out in 4 directions. And I think it's something like 6 or 7 lasers in each direction. And he can move a little bit while firing that, but really, really slowly. And then Yuan Nang is, from what I read, based on Sun Wukong from Journey to the West, and is a strong female character who flies on a cloud and wants to be the strongest person in the world. Her primary shot fires forward, and then at level 3, she gets these swords that sort of shoot out from the side and then go forward to sort of give you a little bit wider attack. Now, her charge shot can deflect bullets, and basically she carries the staff with her, and so when you charge it up, she will lunge her staff forward, and so whatever's in the path of that staff will take damage, and so it can actually deflect bullets. As far as I know, hers is the only charge attack that can do that. And also, if you're close enough to your target, it will do damage going forward, and it will do damage as the staff retracts.
And character here is the second, or is it the third time it's been in? No, it's the second time it's been in a SCG, because you have Cloudmaster for the Sega Master System, right? Which was also based upon the character of Sun Wukong, or then there was Gunbird, and then what we won with Legend of the Monkey King, or what's
Legend of the Monkey King.
Yep, so that 3 times that this character's been. I mean, Journey to the West, the character of Sun Wukong has been used several times. Anyone who's familiar with Dragon Ball Z will know of Kakarot or Goku on being based upon Sun Wukong as well. I mean, but those are the 3 that I can think of. Can you think of any more?
Not off the top of my head. At Yuan Nang's bomber, she releases this series of cloud minion things that sort of shoot out from behind her and then spread out kind of horizontally across the screen, and they will damage anything in their path, and so they'll sort of fly forward, and once they reach a target, if it takes damage, they'll slow down somewhat, but then that's just damaging that enemy or target as it's flying up toward the top of the screen. And then finally you've got Tetsu, who is a 60-year-old man who flies a pedal-powered helicopter. He fires forward, and it widens somewhat as you power up, and then starting at level 3, it adds powerful missiles, and then his charge shot shoots out an extra barrage of missiles. And then his bomber is this interesting thing where it's sort of, he throws out these explosive barrels kind of to the side and then in front of him. So it creates these 3 sort of explosions with flames that sort of come up. It's not a panic bomb, so you can't use it if you're about to get hit by a bullet, because it takes just a second to deploy, or half second, but it is powerful.
Yeah, I was going to say that they had ripped off Namco for the Prop Cycle, but Prop Cycle the game didn't come out until 1996, so maybe they ripped off Gunbird.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, for anyone who is unfamiliar with Prop Cycle, it is a Namco arcade machine where you basically like an exercise bike and you pedal and pedal, trying to collect balloons and various stuff on a flying bicycle, as it were, and you can get a 50-minute workout in 10 minutes.
Interesting.
It's worth checking out if you ever find one in an arcade.
Okay.
And so let's switch over to power-ups.
There are 3 pickups available in the game. You've got the P power-up icons that drop from specific enemies, and those, of course, can be used to power up your character's main shot, which you can do up to 4 times. Now, each capsule has a specific amount of ammo in it, so as you're shooting your weapon, you're depleting that ammo, and then eventually you'll deplete it all the way, and your character will power down to the previous or the next level down. And so that was one of the things that I figured out or learned as we were kind of playing through the month. Is I always thought it was a timing thing with the earlier Psikyo games that had this power down feature or what have you, this power down cycle. It's sort of a holdover from the first Aero Fighters or Sonic Wings title. And so, like I said, I always thought it was a timer where you get so much time at each power level, and then once you reach that threshold, then it powers down. But no, it's actually the number of shots. So it is to your advantage to not just hold down the auto fire button and to be a little bit more selective about when you're firing, because then you're not expending that ammo. And you can, when you get to new enemies and things, that will give you another P icon. Hopefully then you can stay at that highest power level throughout a good portion of the game. The bomber is just a large ammunition shell with a B on it. And of course, each bomber you pick up will add 1 to your stock. And then you can also pick up coins that will show up on the ground after you destroy certain enemies. These are always worth 200 points. So there's really nothing more to those.
So the basic story of Gunbird is that each character is attempting to collect 4 pieces of a magic mirror or 4 MacGuffins to assemble them so that way they can make a wish. Also on the lookout for this magic mirror is the Trump Gang, a gang of sky pirates. The white-haired Lady Rouge... Oh, it's Rogue. The white-haired Lady Rogue is their leader, and her minions are Ace and Claude. They serve as most of the boss fights in the game, using different vehicles and machinery to try and thwart your progress and take the mirror for themselves. Yeah, it's... it's no Tex Maxium, but it pushes the story along.
No, but maybe they can upgrade for just, instead of looking for just the MacGuffins, maybe they can go after some sausage egg MacGuffins.
Oh, jeez. Oh my gosh! Yeah, wow! Oh boy! All right,
I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Wall earlier. They broke the family-friendly fourth wall earlier, and we have entered into dad joke territory.
Always.
That's what's on the other side. No, I mean the story does enough to act serviceable and bring the plots along and explain why some of the characters are. Now, it doesn't explain some of the endings, which are quite interesting in themselves, but it gives enough for your character to do stuff other than, spaceship come down, shoot, explode. It's just enough to get the game going. It's not going to be Shakespeare.
True. You can't expect Shakespeare from shooting games.
Unless it's Einhander. That story is Shakespeare.
Yeah, a case could be made.
Alright, and speaking of the story and endings, if you play the game co-op or 2-player, the character stories intertwine. This can lead to some humorous interactions as well as one story that is not family appropriate. And that is one with Ash and Marion, which crosses over into that very lolly territory that Shin John mentioned, and I don't think I will describe it here, but suffice it to say, interesting choices made on that one, and most of them are quite humorous and lead to comical outcomes.
Yep.
The other interesting thing I found out, especially for trying out the Fightcade version, is having two people increases the difficulty, especially on the Fightcade version or the worldwide release by quite a bit.
Yeah, that was a bit of a rude awakening. I felt like I was making progress with the game over the course of the month, and then I played Fightcade and was very roundly put back in my place.
You were slapped and told to sit down, yep. That's alright, though. I got used to being slapped and told to sit down after I started playing Gradius 3 Arcade. I'm used to it.
Thank you, sir. May I have another?
Yes. Alright, unlike many arcade games, Gunbird doesn't reset your score upon continuing, but it will increment in the lowest 2 digits by 1 for each credit used to show how many additional credits beyond the first that were part of the score. As with all Psikyo games, there are 5 difficulty levels. They start at Monkey as being the easiest. Second is Child. Third is Very Easy. 4 is Easy. 5 is Normal or Default. 6 is Hard, and 7 is Very Hard. I did try a little bit with the Monkey and Child, but I went straight for Normal, because I want to get an idea of what the designers thought was the intended target there. And it was, for Psikyo requirements, it was pretty difficult. What settings did you play on?
Yeah, I started the month on Normal. Kind of, got a feel for the game. Then I went down and at some point did Monkey and Child, and I got those clears pretty quickly. Spent a decent amount of time with Very Easy and didn't quite get my clear, but then I finished the month out kind of mostly focusing back on Normal, or using the score attack mode, which is basically normal but no continues. And so I would say it was about half normal, almost half normal, and then the other half in varying other difficulties.
Yeah, did you happen to try Very Hard?
I did not. I am not into that much punishment.
Okay. I wasn't feeling up to it either, so I just thought if you had some thoughts. Alright, early console ports, which is the Saturn and the PS1, had a wobble mode to allow you to play on standard and CRT. That wasn't rotated in the playfield, would scroll up and down as you move to allow you to see all of the action. They also had tape modes available, though this excludes Mobile Light Force. I played with this mode for a little bit with the Saturn port, and it sort of felt like cheating, because look, I'm moving backwards now. I can just move backwards and then can know exactly where this enemy is placed and make things a little bit easier. I mean, you get the same thing after playing these stages over and over again. You just know where stuff's going to appear, especially the first 4 stages. But wobble mode was interesting, but it felt like cheating to me after playing the Steam version where you had the whole screen in Tate for so long.
Yeah, and I don't know so much about cheating as it just feels like, I don't know, it feels like because you can't see everything, it makes it harder to play. Unless I reach a point where I kind of have those stages memorized, which I was able to do by playing a full view like I was doing on the Steam port. When I played the Saturn port, I messed with wobble for just briefly. And, that's kind of how I played Strikers 1945 2 originally, was wobble mode, because that was the very first Saturn import I bought. I've mentioned that on the podcast several times. But with this, because I have the ability to do a Tate configuration, I did that with the Saturn port. And I kind of feel like that's probably the way that I should have been playing most of the month, because it actually felt a little bit better than the Steam version, and I felt like I did a little bit better than when I was playing on the Steam version.
Yeah, I ran into that too, where the Steam version didn't feel like quite right. It felt like it was mostly there, but there was something missing. Couldn't quite put my finger on it. One thing I can put my finger on and say was greatly done is the graphics. It has a very colorful manga anime art style. It was very cartoonish stuff, but especially with the jungle stage, there where everything was fleshing out. You had and easy to see. I didn't come into a point where any of the bullets. I guess I didn't include Battle Garega Syndrome. Where did the bullets go? They're instantly camouflaged. The quality character portraits had a lot of personality, and the quirky and flawed characters that you see with it. And there, it almost, it sort of like Looney Tunes, Japanese Looney Tunes type characters. The boss designs were definitely interesting, and each one was unique. Felt very steampunk in some ways, and other ways was very Incan inspired. There was definitely a lot of variety. And the final boss, you've written down here, what you made it look like Gizmo. I thought it looked sort of like a cross between a tiger and a jaguar or something. Something there was very anamorphic. There,
right.
I mean, it was, and some of the endings play into that. One of those where Ash says, "I wanted to be handsome," and had the most. I wanted to have be the wisest, and the genie, sort of anamorphic character at the end, changes him to look almost exactly like him. Or another one of Ash's endings is he says, the German inventor, it says, "I want a beautiful lady to match my rugged good looks," and it turns into the genie turns into this furry looking woman. So it says, "Here I am." So that comical art style that seems to work pretty well. It was really easy to see where the bullets were coming from and didn't suffer from Garega syndrome, and the characters gave it personality. So I thought overall it worked pretty well.
Yeah, and one thing I forgot to mention or forgot to put in the notes was the character designer of the Gunbird series is Masato Natsumoto, and there's a scan on shmuplations.com of the Gunbird manga that has some pretty cool artwork and some really nice illustrations of the different characters. And anyway, it's pretty good art. There's a couple of questionable choices. The character Yuan Nang is I'll say scantily clad, not too bad, but then then you have Rogue, the leader of the Sky Pirates, and there's cleavage, and then I don't even know what you call her outfit. It's just really wacky.
Yeah, I think that's saying that the only way that this game could get wackier is if we just start putting googly eyes on everything.
Yeah.
Alright, so we talked quite a bit about the graphics. You want to talk a little bit about the sound?
Yeah. This is a case where I think the sound is definitely definitely has more personality in a game like this than Strikers 1945-2 that we covered before. When we talked about that game, I mentioned that the music itself was fine, but it didn't really connect with me. Some of it might have been because of the type of music that they were going for, and then the audio hardware that they were using in conjunction with that just didn't really translate that very well to me, so that it matched the game. But here, Masaki Izutani really took the strengths of the first generation Psikyo hardware and was able to make something that had fun music that sort of went back and forth between, light, bouncy, kind of melodic pieces, and then the two different boss themes that were a little bit darker in tone, but still kind of, high energy and interesting to listen to and kind of catchy. And I think at least one of those themes he revisits and kind of redoes for the second Gunbird game. But yeah, this game definitely, the audio design in this game has more personality. One of the things that I really liked with the sound effects, and I really think the sound effects, generally speaking, are pretty solid, but the thing that I really like is that there's a sound cue that you get when your charge attack is ready. So when you're flying around the screen and you're dodging bullets and you're trying to take in enemies, it's nice to have that audio cue to let you know that your charge attack is ready, so that you don't have to watch the character to see either the little flash that they make or to see their animation change. That was one of the things that, we've already talked graphics, but I'll touch on real shortly, is that when their charge attack is ready, they all sort of change their position or animate in some way. I really like Yuan Nang's, where she's holding her staff, and then when her charge attack is ready, she's twirling her staff, which is a really nice touch. But that helped me out a lot when I could just listen for those cues, those audio cues, as to when the charge attack was ready, so I didn't have to watch the screen to see that it was ready, and I could just, fire one after the other, particularly when I was using Yuan, because her charge attack charges so fast. And so that was a really nice touch. There's also some good voice work, which I don't know how much of the voice work was used in the original arcade release. When I played it on Saturn, I didn't hear nearly as much of the voiceover. So I don't know if some of that was cut out for the Saturn version. But at least on the Steam version, there's a lot of voiceover. But even the stuff that you get in-game, like the things that the characters say when they're unleashing their bomber, or their charge attacks, or picking up items and things like that, it's interesting. Valnus has this hilarious laugh when he's fully powered up, and then you pick up extra power-up icons. He does this like sort of thing, which is just ridiculous. And I don't know what it is. I'm sure it's something specific in Japanese, but when Marion fires her charge attack, it almost sounds like she's yelling, "Sexy boy!" So I always got a kick out of that.
I'm going to have to clip those sound bites from you and use those.
Use them as notifications for your phone.
No. I do not want "Sexy Boy" played on there. I'll save that for Cho and Nikki.
There you go.
No, I thought things were well done here. One of the things that I'm beginning to understand more and more is how much you can tell about a STG and how well the sound is mixed by the explosions.
Oh, sure.
I would have to say that Gunbird, nothing sounded out of place on there. It wasn't, no singing mosquitoes in this soundtrack, and the explosions sound correctly. Nothing blew out my speakers or maybe wanting to rip off my headphones. I thought everything was appropriate for the game. I do find it a little bit difficult to think of maybe listening to this outside of the game, so it wasn't something that really sticks in my head, but it certainly was appropriate for the game.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right, we're going to move on to the hardest part of the show right now with scoring. So, everybody get ready to take notes here. If you collect a coin, you get 200 points. You collect a power-up icon when fully powered up. You get 2,000 points. And you have to take out enemies as quickly as possible to spawn additional waves in some areas to get extra points. There you go. Those are all the super tips for scoring.
Whew, that's a lot. I don't know if I can keep up.
I know. Press buttons to engage scoring for maximum profit. No, as you can tell, we're joking here, but the scoring system's pretty simple for this, and this is pretty par for the course for for a STG of this vintage. It's not something that you're going to be overly. Batsugam was released the same year and just started out what would become the Danmaku genre. So you're not going to get a lot of anything with crazy routing or any of that stuff that's in here. It's your traditional STG, and the scoring system is married to it. But it's not a bad thing. It's in some ways a little bit of a breath of fresh air after playing all the Cave I've been playing. But to go expecting, this is the way you need to route it, this is what you need to do, it's just not going to be there.
Yeah, and I want to say, if I remember correctly, the bosses do time out after not too long. So there's not really a whole lot you can do in terms of boss milking either. Some of the bosses have different parts that you can sort of destroy in sequence. So there's a little bit of that you can do, but realistically, there's not a lot of flexibility there. So what's your take on this game?
My take on this game is it is something that I could go back to and play in short spurts and just have fun with it and not have to take too seriously. I think it's one of those, it's not going to be one of those endeavors where I'm getting ready for Gradius 3. Let me drink some water. Let me put on one of those stress relievers. Let's go and put on this. It is a light snack. In other words, it's something that can be picked up and played at almost any given time, and something that you can play for or in short spurts. It doesn't take that long to get through, and no matter how much time you spend in it, you get a lot of enjoyment out of it. I certainly found it more enjoyable than Strikers and Strikers 2. I'm definitely looking forward to playing Gunbird 2, but it's just one of these quick pick up and play games. Mobile Light Force support barring here, but something that would be easy enough to recommend for someone to try and get into. I think that's part of the reason why we had so many people join in, is because it was so pick up and play, and you didn't need to deal with a lot of rules or pathing or anything that would be forcing somebody to deep dive into the game.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of in the same boat. I've had this long-standing love-hate relationship with Psikyo games, and part of it, I think, stems from, as I said, because I bought Strikers 1945-2 first, and because I did not have the ability to rotate my TV, I had to play wobble mode, which was not the ideal way to play it. Now that I actually have the ability to play it in a more proper Tate fashion, I've started to explore this library a little bit more. After I bought that first Psikyo collection, I started putting some time into the first Strikers 1945 game, and of course, we played Strikers 1945-2, and I did some of that, but this is the first one that I think I actually could have a fighting chance of possibly, maybe, eventually one day securing a first loop clear. I don't know yet which character I would achieve that with. I'd like to say that I could do it with Yuan, but I didn't have as much luck with her during the month as I thought I would. Although I will admit as I was using her character, I was playing super aggressively. So it may be just a matter of learning to do that while also better routing the game and having a little bit more precision in my movements and placement on screen. But I feel like since my early experiences were with Strikers 1945 2 and with Gunbird 2 on the Dreamcast, with those having not unlimited charge attacks, where you sort of have to power those up by taking out other enemies, you really have to use those sparingly so that you can sort of time them when they're most appropriate. Whereas here, the usage of those special attacks is going to be a little bit more determined on when there are lulls in the action long enough for you to charge your attack. And that's, of course, going to depend on the characters because they all charge up at different rates. And also the effectiveness of those attacks. So, in my case, because Yuan's charge attack charges so quickly, I feel like you can abuse that quite a bit for clearing bullets, for doing damage, and, there's a lot of usefulness in that. On the flip side, a character like Tetsu, whose charge attack takes a long time to charge, it's very situational, I feel, when it's going to be real useful. Or like Valnus, for example. Valnus's charge attack is the most powerful in the game, but it takes an inordinately long amount of time to charge. So that, I think, becomes the most situational, where in the moments between when you're going through the cutscene for a boss or what have you, and then going into that boss fight, that's a good opportunity to do that so that you can charge that up and instantly take out, a portion of a boss or do a bunch of damage. But I don't think his charge attack is one that you're going to be using all that frequently. But I think this is the first time that I've played a Psikyo game where I really feel like, okay, I might actually have a fighting chance at doing something with this game and getting somewhere. I got discouraged during the month. My streams were evidence of that. And certainly there were times when I felt like, okay, I'm playing like total garbage. I can't play this game. I'm terrible. I suck. And, I'm never going anywhere with this. But I think I sort of go through that cycle with every shoot 'em up that we play, because I'm my own harshest critic, but also because when I hit an early wall and I get that initial bit of discouragement of, oh man, I'm not going to progress anymore, it's just a matter of trying to work my way to pushing past that. With Psikyo games, I feel like when I hit a wall, I hit a wall. And I'm not going any further. But I did feel like I made it a little bit further and was able to progress a little bit better in this game than I have in the other Psikyo games that I've played in the past. So I feel like, I'm not sure if it's just because Gunbird is a little bit more approachable, or if it's just me sort of coming alongside Psikyo's flow and understanding it better. Maybe it's a combination of the two. But I actually felt like this game may have potential as we continue to play these games and I continue to sort of hone my skills. This might be one of those that I come back to try and get a legit, normal first loop clear. I don't really have any interest in a 2-loop clear because the amount of hours I would have to put in to accomplish that with a Psikyo game is probably more than I want to spend, and realistically I have far too many games in my backlog for that. But I do feel like a first loop clear of this game is something that I could reach at some point, and so that gives me a little bit of hope in that I can maybe get there at some point. And so I kind of feel like maybe this is this is the first Psikyo game that I've been able to latch onto a little bit more tightly. The one thing I want to mention is, if you struggle with this game like I do, try the mobile ports. The interesting thing about the mobile ports is, of course, you're not restricted in your movements. That's something that we didn't really talk about, but the characters all have different movement speeds. So Tetsu is the slowest, but when you're playing the mobile port, he's great to play with because his missiles are very strong. And so once you power up to level 3 or 4, his missiles start to wreck everything on screen. But when you're not restricted by his slow speed of movement, and you can just sort of whip your finger back and forth and, sort of do that thing that most of us probably did as little kids the first time we walked up to a Twin Cobra machine or whatever, is you put a quarter in and then you just do the sweep left and right. Do the sweep left and right and hit the fire button a bunch of times to try and take everything out. Eventually you learn that that's not the best strategy and that you have to learn the levels more and sort of know what you're going in for. But with the mobile port, you can kind of get away with some of that. You can't do it completely because the game is still difficult, but I found myself able to progress a lot further, a lot faster with the mobile port because I could use any character I wanted and sort of get away with that a little bit more because I had a little bit easier ability to kind of quickly get around bullets or macro around patterns and things that I probably wouldn't be able to do if I was playing on a pad or a stick. So the mobile ports are kind of broken, but they're sort of fun because of that. So I think they're worth a look, and they don't cost anything. So if you're inclined to play them, that's at least one way to sort of check these games out, try before you buy.
Yeah, you use one finger for the mobile port and use a different finger for the regular port.
Well, that's a little bit more shmupping than my brain can handle.
Oh man, that finger has got its own game, I hear now.
Indeed.
No, I think that this is more of an accessible. I agree. I think that Gunbird, the original, is more of an accessible port no matter what version you play than some of the other Psikyo games. I don't know if that's just because it's one of their first games or if it's just sort of was made to be a little bit more accessible in general. It seems to have really good balancing. That's why so many people try different characters. I know that Marion seems to be a fan favorite and is sort of pushed as the de facto mascot of the game. But I do see a lot of people playing Sun Yun or the... I played a lot with that character, and I see some people playing as was it Valnus?
Oh, right.
I always get that stuck with swapped around with Valus. My head here, too many games. So Valnus, a lot of people using him. I've seen some. There's on that and then Tetsu. You seem to favor him for a lot of your early playthroughs.
Yeah, so did Beat Out Reality.
Yeah, it's really nice that everybody sort of has their own play style that can be done from this, and it's not where you're feeling forced to. I think it speaks to how well balanced this game is, despite its difficulty, that so many people can get enjoyment and make progress by choosing and identifying with their favorite character. Alright, now that we've given our opinions, let's go to thoughts from the RF Generation community. Our first thought comes to us from Geriatric Damaku. Gotta say, the lag issues reported on Switch are not present. So I'm going to be playing Official Score Attack on this version and submitting it.
Yeah, and I didn't fire up the Switch version during the course of the month because my understanding was that the Steam ports were supposed to have the input lag reduced, so I stuck with that. But, obviously everyone's different in terms of their sensitivity to input lag. I'm not that sensitive to it, But it's good that, some people are able to play it and not really feel like they have to deal with that.
Yeah, I wonder if I'm trying to think of it as Gunbird or Gunbird 2 that was originally ported to the Switch before the collections came out. Do you remember which one that was? I think that was a version that had the highest input lag, right?
Oh, I'm not sure.
I thought that they came outside of the collection. One of them did. And that version had really high input lag. Maybe I'm misremembering it.
Yeah, well, they all got individual eShop releases, I think, but...
yeah, I think
I'm
that
wrong.
the eShop releases were terrible, but the other ports were okay. They weren't as bad, but then the Steam version was the best. I could be misremembering it, but I think that's how it goes.
Sure. Faux Macho joined us and put in a fair amount of commentary in the thread. Faux Macho says, apparently the PS2 Gunbird release has a hitbox mode. That's really cool to see under the hood, and they included a screenshot, but so far I can only find this one YouTube video showing it off, which is linked in the thread. The back half of the game has some fun bosses, but I really wish there was a practice mode on the Switch port. In that, we can agree. Later in the thread, Faux Macho says, I started the month on the Saturn version, and I liked the scrolling. It gave me a sense of control, but I know that's all faked, and after playing the Switch version, I don't think I'd like going back to it. I say I know, but that's me assuming the Saturn port cropped the view a bit, so you were just looking at the bottom 80% or top 80% when you're controlling the scrolling. I would love to know if Valnus and everyone have the same hitboxes. Valnus matches my playstyle, but he either has a bigger hitbox or it's just his low speed that gets me hit more often. If you can get a screenshot of the practice mode with hit display on with some of the characters, I'd find that really interesting. Yeah, the hitbox thing has always been a little bit of a sticky wicket for me in these games because I never quite know exactly where on the character they're vulnerable. So yeah, that's something I always struggled with. And so having a hitbox indicator or practice, mode kind of thing where you could actually see where it is would be super helpful. And then later again in the thread, I really enjoyed the game, but I wish the Switch/City Connection Zero Div port had more to it. I'm not good enough to detect the lag, so I'll have to trust the science on that one. But a practice mode and online leaderboard would have been nice. So thank you, Faux Macho. Those some good thoughts.
Yeah, a practice mode would have definitely been useful in there. I agree that giving it sort of like the M2 quality of life treatment where you could try different stuff. I mean, at least for the later stages 1 through 4, you sort of just are forced to practice those over and over again no matter what. Alright, so our next thoughts come to us from Cork. So you can control the speed of the scrolling a little bit by moving up and down in original mode? What? I'm not sure how I like it. Maybe I'll play more and see if it's something I can get into. In this, he's referencing wobble effect in original mode. Later in the thread, he says, I don't think I like the Saturn original mode scrolling mechanic. Just makes it feel like less of a shmup to me. I'm playing the Switch version and the lag doesn't seem to be too bad, at least for the lower difficulties at my skill level. I think I like more powerful characters like Tetsu and Valnus at this point. They play according to the Cobra Kai motto. Strike first, strike hard, and no mercy. Later in the thread, I've been comparing the Saturn and Switch versions. I got clear as Unchild on both so far. Valnus on the Switch and Marion on the original mode for Saturn. I prefer the regular scrolling on the Switch, but the original mode on the Saturn is growing on me. I didn't do so good in that mode on the slower character like Valnus that I had been using, but as soon as I switched over to Marion, I did better. I was able to get out a few times I felt essentially trapped. I think you might need a faster character to take advantage of the adjustable scrolling speed. I tried out level 3 difficulty and I see the bullets are a significant jump in speed. I'm curious to see if I do better with the regular scrolling or the adjustable scrolling speed. Yeah, I think that wobble is something that everybody should try to get a chance on there. I think that the closest I can put now is vertical. The ways that people are experimenting with this to try and merge the two. I think at the time wobble was a pretty good compromise. We saw it in Grega. I know it's in some of the other strikers. There, and it's definitely there in Gunbird. And you had given your thoughts on that. That I would put it, the 3 modes of STGs. You have Tate, Yoko, and Wobble.
Yeah, I mean, Wobble is an interesting curiosity of its time because, of course, everyone was playing on CRTs at that point, and most of us either didn't have an extra that we could dedicate to Tate mode or didn't really want to rotate our TVs. And for those that didn't have access to an arcade cabinet or a PVM that you could kind of do that more easily, a lot of that was just sort of, you played wobble mode because that's what you had. And so either you have wobble mode, which keeps the game in its original aspect ratio, but you can only see so much of it at the time, or on screen at one time, and that way your sprites and your graphics translate over a little bit better. Or you make sacrifices, and you either just don't see as much of the playfield, and the game potentially gets harder, or they shrink it down, and then stuff doesn't look right because everything gets shrunk down and sprites and graphics are made smaller as a compromise for being in a 4:3 aspect ratio. So Wobble's an interesting curiosity of its time, and I think it was probably the best that they could do for the hardware that was available and to accommodate for those that wouldn't or couldn't rotate their TVs. But yeah, I think I would agree. It's something that people should probably try just to sort of see what we had to do at the time. But I wouldn't recommend playing in those modes for much more than just a curiosity. We also had Chris Tap76, who says, Ash to me is the best overall character to play with. I find Marion's special weapon too distracting on screen. Tetsu certainly has the power, but find him too slow. And then Chris offered some great final thoughts here at the end of the month. Great game. Mainly used Ash and Yuan Nong. I found Yuan Nong the best overall character with a good balance of speed, power, and bomb ability. My highest overall score was achieved with her. Marion was the worst. I just found her fully powered up shot too distracting when trying to dodge enemy bullets. I found the game's difficulty really ramps up after the 4th level. Tried the PS2 version on a CRT, but actually preferred the Switch version on a 4K TV, using the TV's game mode setting. Didn't really notice any lag, if I'm honest, compared to the PS2 version. To sum up, I have many versions of this game. PS2, Saturn, and Switch. The Switch version is a great port, and never noticed any of the reported lag on these zero-div ports. Maybe Gunbird 2 should be on the agenda, if it has not been covered already. It has not, so when we get around to Gunbird 2, you'll have to jump in with us.
Yeah, once your rage has subsided from this year's Psikyo game, we can try this again.
Yeah, I think about once every 12 to 18 months, I can deal with another Psikyo game and throw one in the mix, and I can rage for a month and then put it away.
I think it's interesting to see how many people reported that they didn't see the issues on lag on the Switch version.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that as well. And again, obviously some people are more sensitive to lag than others, and some are much less sensitive. So maybe it's just that most of the folks that we had participating alongside us this month were less sensitive to it.
And the other funny takeaway, as you were describing wobble mode, is a product of its time. You make it sound like the angry old schmupper who, the equivalent of, we had to walk in the snow uphill both ways to get to school, and their equivalent for wobble mode. And my day we played with wobble mode and we liked it. You young whippersnappers in tate mode.
I was just going to say the same thing. Back in my day, we played wobble mode and we liked it.
Yeah, it is definitely an interesting curiosity, and I'm interested after hearing some of the stuff of the PS2 version. I sort of dismissed it, thinking that the Steam port and then maybe trying the Saturn version would give me a pretty good list of comparisons, but having a hitbox comparison, I may have to fire that up now.
Yeah, I definitely think that would be worth a look, if for nothing else than to have that practice mode available.
Indeed. So, what are your final thoughts on Gunbird?
Gunbird is a solid title. I definitely think there's fun to be had in co-op mode, especially if you just want to go in and, spend a bunch of virtual quarters and just credit feed your way through the game, kind of like Geriatric Damaku and I, or Cork and I, did on Fightcade, and just sort of fight over the power-ups and blast away and have some fun, and try out some of the two-player combos, except for Ash and Marion. Don't do that. Otherwise, check it out. I mean, it's well worth a look, and I think it's got enough personality that that it's worth coming back to. And I won't spoil anything, but most of the endings are fairly amusing, with a couple of exceptions, and it's almost like many of the endings, because of the idea of the game is to sort of go, chase after the pieces of this magic mirror so that you can get a wish. A lot of the endings are sort of comical, a comical exposition of be careful of what you wish for.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think it is a solid title that's surprisingly well balanced for a Psikyo game. I always think of them being very difficult, and my first foray into this was with a Strikers game as well. I feel like the Striker series isn't as well balanced as Gunbird is. Everyone's got their own favorite ship, sure, but you don't have this great variety of playstyles that seems to really make a difference on here. I just think that there is more to Gunbird, and it's easier, more of a pick-up and play title. And I definitely see myself coming back to this and just playing it for, a couple play styles, and even if I don't get very far, still having a good time with it, and that's the hallmark of a good shmup.
Well said.
All right, so let's get on to our celebrations here. Celebration of how well everyone did. So let's take a look at the high scores.
Ah, yes. So, for once, Zoido was not the high score winner, or at least not in the normal mode. That was Fomacho, who got 546,100 points with Marion. Zoido did take the easy category with 522,500, also with Marion. Very easy was Fomacho again, with 773,300 with Marion, and that was a clear. I came on top in the child difficulty level with 743,200 points, and that was with Tetsu. And then on monkey difficulty, Fomacho also had the top spot with 770,200 points, again with Marion.
Congratulations, Fomacho.
Yeah, pretty good showing this month.
All right, and speaking of months here, what is next month's game? Or should I say this month's game as we're recording this in June?
Yeah, so we're early June as we record this, and so this month's game is Mercenary Force, which is the North American title. The Japanese title is Tenjin Kaisen, and this is for the Game Boy. It's a little bit of a change of pace for us, going with something a bit slower, but no less interesting. And then for July, we are going to be taking a look at Project Starship X, which is out for the Switch, PS4, and PC. And a bit of a, I guess you could call it a roguelite kind of shmup, where it's similar to Psikyo in that the stages are somewhat randomized. There are different stages that sort of crop up in various orders. And they're a little bit different every time. They're not exactly the same, but they're not wildly different. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that plays out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to trying out the Studio Mudprints shmup of 2020 and playing it a little bit some more. There's certainly some weird stuff I've seen in that game.
Oh yeah, but it looks like it's pretty whimsical.
Alright, speaking of Studio Mudprints, I'd like to thank them for the design of Studio Mudprints Bullet Heaven. I'd like to thank them for the design of our logo. Like to thank Kogusu for the intro and outro music, everybody from the RF Generation Playcast and Collector Cast, as well as everyone who joined us for the month of May in Playing with Gunbird. And I'd like to thank MetalFRO for streaming and trying his best not to be distracted by dogs.
Yeah, well, the distraction's constant, but I make it work somehow.
The danger is real.
Yes, the danger is real.
Thank you for listening and have a good time.
Thank you.